Good morning. Welcome to Issues and Answers. This is a public affairs program from Cumulus Media in Saginaw. My name is Scott Stein, and today we're going to talk about some changes to Michigan's minimum wage rules and also paid leave rules. They will be changing and being updated here and phased in over the next year or two. And I thought we'd talk with, from the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, it is Wendy Block on the other end of our phone line this morning. Good morning, Wendy.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Now, Wendy is Senior Vice President of Business Advocacy for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, and you're actually going to be in our neck of the woods, Wendy, on Friday, October 11th. There will be an event put on by the Saginaw Chamber of Commerce right at Apple Mountain, and we'll give our listeners some more details on that in a little bit as far as how to get registered. But basically, a lot of what we're going to talk about this morning will be talked about at this luncheon, and that is the changes to minimum wage and the paid leave rules. And there's been, obviously, a lot of back and forth, some fighting in the Michigan legislature. The Michigan Supreme Court, of course, got involved, and they did come down with a ruling fairly recently, right, Wendy? And I thought we'd kind of walk it through. Why don't we start with the minimum wage? Currently, what is it, $10.33 an hour?
It is, yeah.
Okay, and that's going to be changing here over the next a few years. Give us an update. What exactly happened, and where's the minimum wage here in Michigan headed?
Yeah, so the Michigan Supreme Court issued a monumental ruling in late July related to two ballot initiatives going back to 2018 that were never voted on by the people. And instead, the legislature took an option that is available to them under the Michigan Constitution, where they adopted these two ballot proposals, one on minimum wage, one on paid leave. They made that law, and then they subsequently amended it. And the Supreme Court has come down with a ruling saying they had the right to adopt it, but they did not have the right to amend it in that same legislative session. And so they invalidated, or said basically what the legislature did was unconstitutional. And now they're ordering into effect these two ballot proposals and that language that was, again, never voted on by the people. So these two changes to the law that the court has ordered, in effect, will actually take hold on February 21 of 2025. And they have deep impacts on both Michigan businesses and employees alike. So specifically on the minimum wage, what they've done is they've ordered a sharp increase in Michigan's minimum wage. Now, you might say, $10.33 to what? What is the minimum wage going to in February? Well, we don't know, because the court has basically said we're going to pretend like year one is actually year one of the ballot proposal, which would have been 2019. So the court has ordered the state treasurer to do some math to figure out what the inflationary increase, what $10 in 2019 would actually be today. And we're estimating that first jump in the minimum wage will be somewhere in the range of $12.36 to $12.56 an hour, but we won't know until the state treasurer tells us. And then we'll be increasing from there every year based on an inflationary step increase. So by 2029, the minimum wage probably will be around $15 an hour. The big kicker here is that the court also ordered a full elimination of what's known as the tip credit. So that means restaurant workers will begin to see large increases in their tip minimum wage, and that tip minimum wage will go away in February of 2029. And this is going to be especially difficult for our businesses in the restaurant industry and anyone relying on tipped employees to deal with, because it's a very large increase in those establishments' labor costs, really just devastating.
So by 2029, I know this has been in effect for a long, long time, the minimum wage for tipping, for tip earners, for tip employees, basically, restaurants, servers, waiters, that kind of thing. That's going to go away, and they will be getting the state minimum wage in 2029?
They will. And again, we don't know what the full minimum wage will be in 2029. Right. We're estimating it will be around $15 an hour. But because this is, a triple-digit increase in labor costs for those restaurants, we're really just uncertain how many of these businesses will survive. They're going to certainly have to raise menu prices to try to absorb these large jumps in their labor costs. They may decide that they're going to move to counter service and eliminate some staff as a result to pay for this. We're concerned that many establishments altogether just can't make the math work and will not be able to continue with their operations. But we're also concerned about those tipped employees and what happens with customers and their tipping behaviors once they know that those servers are making the full minimum wage. Will people cut back on their tipping habits? Yeah. And especially once they see those large increases in menu costs. And it could very well end up hurting the very workers it's intending to help, which is why you see a lot of tipped employees who've been very outspoken saying, not so fast, I don't want this change. Legislature, we don't want this. So, help us out here.
How did the change get initiated? What was it? I know it was originally supposed to be put on a ballot. It was never on a ballot, never voted on. It was the Michigan legislature that started this ball rolling?
No, so it was two outside groups outside of Michigan who decided that they wanted to use our ballot initiative process to put these issues before Michigan voters.
Okay.
And so what those outside groups did is they got sufficient signatures to qualify for the ballot in 2018. And that's kind of where the legislature got involved because the legislature allows the Constitution allows the legislature to have a role and to adopt. The legislature adopted these ballot proposals, though, with the idea that they wanted to amend them. And now the Supreme Court says you can't. They didn't have the right to amend them. So that's kind of how we're in the position they are. But, frankly, we believe that the court ruling achieved maybe a policy goal that some of the justices wanted to achieve, but really ignores the words in the Constitution. It's a big jump to get to the conclusion that they reached. But we're at the end of our road on appeals, and so now we're just trying to figure out where do we go from here.
Yeah. Okay, if you're just tuning in this morning, we're speaking with Wendy Block. She is Senior Vice President of Business Advocacy for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. And Wendy will actually be putting on an event here in Saginaw County on Friday, October 11th at Apple Mountain. It's organized and put on by the Saginaw County Chamber of Commerce and the great folks there. And they'd love to have you come out to Apple Mountain if you're a business owner, a restaurant owner, anybody who would be affected by the changes in the minimum wage law or the paid leave law. Now, you're with the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. From your standpoint, would this have been something better if it would have been put on the ballot, or are you guys okay with how this has played out?
Well, so here's the tough thing with ballot initiatives. We saw this kind of play out with the two different marijuana ballot proposals. Once a ballot proposal gets adopted by the people, it takes a super majority vote of the legislature to ever amend it or change it. And so the legislature decided to adopt these ballot proposals with the idea that they would amend it, because when the legislature does adopt, they can amend with a simple majority vote. So they only need, kind of plus one, right? Majority plus one. And so we do think it was still the right decision of the legislature. And moving forward, we are going to be encouraging the legislature to revisit this issue because they still have the opportunity to amend. We are now outside of that window where they first adopted it, outside that legislative window. So they can still go back between now and February and make some additional changes to both of these laws to make it more workable. I mean, that's really what we're looking for. It's not a wholesale change, not to go back to exactly where we are today, but to make sure that implementation works for businesses and that the decisions that are made don't actually harm the very workers that they're intending to help. And so, we're not really looking in the rearview mirror on this. We're really kind of looking out that front windshield and trying to figure out where do we go from here.
Yeah. Before we change our discussion to paid leave and the changes there, again, minimum wage starting in February of 2025. So this coming February is expected to be slightly above $12 an hour. You said around maybe $12.30 an hour?
$12.30 1236 to 1256 is what we think.
Okay.
But again, we're waiting on the state treasurer to tell us the exact
and that'll
number.
be more than a $2 jump an hour, because right now, currently here in Michigan, the minimum wage is $10.33 an hour. And then by February of 2029, you're saying, it's going to be at least $15 and probably north of 15. Is that correct?
Yes, and from there it will continue to increase by the rate of inflation. So even when we hit 2029, that's not really the end of the story. It just goes on autopilot, where every year there will be an inflationary jump. But we talk about our restaurants. So, the current tip minimum wage is 38% of the full minimum wage. Tipped employees are guaranteed. People don't know this. Tipped employees are guaranteed to make the full minimum wage when you combine the tip minimum wage with the tips that they receive at the table. If they do not receive the full minimum wage, when you combine those things together, the employer must pay the difference.
Did not know that.
But the tip minimum wage is going to jump from $3.93 to somewhere in the range of slightly over $6 an hour. So you're seeing there that you have a very large increase. You're jumping from 38% of the full minimum wage to 48% in that year one in 2025. And that's a large jump, right? So for every hour, you take that $2 difference and you multiply it, and then you start multiplying it by weeks in the year and number of employees, and you can very quickly see how this is going to be very expensive, especially for an industry that's, when they're doing well, they've got a 3 to 4% profit margin. These, people are in the restaurant industry because they love to cook and they love hospitality, but they're not really, a lot of restaurants are not in this for the money.
Yeah. And again, just to clarify, $6 wage or so, six and some change for tipped workers, that's going to be in February of 2025, correct?
Correct.
And
yes.
then by 2029, the tipped wage is going to kind of go away and just become the minimum wage.
Yeah. So you're going to jump between 2025 and 2029, those years, you're going to jump from $6, well, really $3.93, where it is currently now, to $15-ish an hour. That's a huge jump, $11 an hour.
Yeah, major change there. Okay, so now let's talk about paid leave, and I'm not sure if this will be an easier topic or not, but in general terms, what were the changes to the paid leave laws, and how is that going to affect businesses and employees?
Yeah, so this one gets a little bit more in the weeds. I'll apologize on that to begin with, but Michigan has a current paid medical leave law in effect today. So we have mandatory paid leave in Michigan. What this does is requires all Michigan businesses, regardless of employer size, so any business that has one or more employees now will need to comply with what's known as the Earned Sick Time Act. So that's that ballot initiative going back to 2018, beginning in February. And it really would put in place one of the most far-reaching and stringent paid leave mandates that we have seen across the country. And really the details are really what makes me say that, why we say it's far-reaching and why it's stringent. It will force, again, employers of all sizes and types, regardless of industry, regardless of employee size, to put into place very generous paid leave policies. And it really seeks to micromanage how workplaces deal with things like notification and increments of time that can be used. It adds a lot of avenues to costly litigation against businesses for compliance mistakes. And we think that ultimately, because of this micromanaging, that it will force many employers to move to separate their banks of time. So a lot of employers combine sick time with vacation time and personal time into one PTO bank. And this really kind of forces them to rethink that approach and potentially have to separate back out those banks of time. And even though employees prefer that model, survey after survey suggests that. So there's a lot of kind of nitty-gritty details here that we would like to see clarified and changed, so employers don't have to completely scrap their existing paid time off policies, especially if they have something very generous in place today, and start over.
All right. Once again, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Wendy Block, Senior Vice President of Business Advocacy for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. And you are basically, obviously, a statewide organization. are all of the local chambers of commerces, like you're coming to Saginaw for an event with the Saginaw Chamber of Commerce, are all the chambers trying to get this word out to their constituents and businesses that they represent?
Yeah, so we've got a great network of local and regional chamber partners across the state. The Saginaw Chamber is an amazing organization and a great advocate for its members, but you have also a number of other great chambers in your region. We are working very closely with what we refer to as the Chamber Federation to help get out the word to legislators about the concerns, the practical and common sense concerns we have about the Supreme Court's decision and helping urge legislators that they need to come to the table in a bipartisan way and really think through the details and think through how we might be able to soften the impact. Again, not looking for wholesale changes, but like how can we make sure these two ballot proposals that the Supreme Court has ordered into effect, despite not ever being voted on by the people, how do we make sure that they are workable and that they don't end up forcing employers to make decisions that don't work for their employees? And so, again, it's going to be a team effort here. We need local businesses to make their voices heard with state lawmakers. We need local and regional chambers to do so. We need our partners here in Lansing, other business and trade associations to do the same. And so we've organized a very large and diverse coalition on this issue and really are just kind of in we're 2 weeks post decision, and really just trying to figure out like what is the path here to softening the impact.
Okay, is there an easy way for folks to get a hold of you guys at the Michigan Chamber? A website, a phone number? What can you share with us?
Yeah, so we have a great toolkit on our website related to the Supreme Court's decision, and it is really focused on helping employers understand their compliance obligations. And that can be found just by going into our website, which is michamber.com. And there's a pop-up there that kind of notifies you about the Supreme Court decision. And from there, you can download this toolkit. We put together an FAQ page and a comparison of the laws today and how they will need to change come February, resources in the community for employment law experts on these things, and just my contact information is there. We'd love to hear from people about, kind of how are they feeling about the Supreme Court's decision? What do they think the legislature should tackle? We've certainly got that list going already and are out talking to lawmakers. But we want to know like how employers in the real world feel about this, and what sorts of decisions do they feel like they're going to be forced to make if the legislature doesn't step in and make some changes.
Okay. And we will welcome you again to Saginaw on Friday, October 11th. Wendy will be at Apple Mountain, an event organized by the Saginaw Chamber of Commerce. It's a luncheon event. There is a small charge to be involved with that, but if you want to connect with the Saginaw Chamber, phone number is 989-752-7161. And their website is saginawchamber.org, and you can reserve a spot. It does take a reservation on that Friday, October 11th, over lunch at Apple Mountain. So, Wendy, thank you so much for walking us through it. It's a little, still confusing to some people, some business owners. So it's very worthwhile that you're doing these meet and greets, so to speak, and in-person visits. And we'll look forward to having you at Apple Mountain in early October, okay?
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, Wendy Block, Senior Vice President of Business Advocacy for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. And that is going to wrap up this edition of Issues and Answers, Public Affairs Program from Cumulus Media in Saginaw. My name is Scott Stein, and if you have an idea for an upcoming segment, by all means, you can email me directly, scott.stein, and that's S-T-I-N-E, at cumulus.com. Scott.stein at cumulus.com. Thanks for listening this morning. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.